Welcome to the W2W review. I am the Oakland Knight, and once again, I'm going to be running solo as the Pirate is actually still working on this Friday's broadcast. So make sure that you stay tuned for this Friday and our pregame broadcast here on the Will to Win. All right, guys, today is Wednesday, so today we're going to go over some of the things that Jack Del Rio said in his press conference, as well as some of the things that Derek Carr went over in his press conference. Now, this should be interesting because what I try to do personally is take what Jack says on the perimeter of things and then fill in the spaces, because a lot of times what tends to happen is coaches, players, a lot of it becomes monotonous. It's pretty much the same stuff. They don't get into injuries. They don't get into certain game plans, which this week all signs show that we're not game planning anyway. But even if it was regular season and they were in regular season mode, you're not going to get that kind of content out of coaches and out of players. So what the media reports is basically what they're allowed to report. And once again, here on the Will to Win, we are not handcuffed as far as that goes. We are allowed to talk about anything and anything that we want to. So with that being said, let's kind of go over some of the big topics that Jack talked about. One of the first things that he mentioned was the fact that we're playing Tennessee. And once again, there's not going to be no game plan. He did, though, mention that he does still plan on playing the starters for a significant amount of time, that he says that they could use the work, which has been obvious to us because we've talked about a lot of, the starters playing a lot, and the starters in our base unit hasn't really changed. I mean, last week in somewhat of another dress rehearsal type of game that has been talked about, it was a lot of the same players. In fact, it was all the same players. Across the line, we're going to get where we're going to get. And the receiver core, the only difference was Holmes and Seth Roberts played into the second half with the second team players. So, but the running back situation is, once again, the thing that I'm focused on personally, and it was basically what we had last year. We saw a lot of Murray, followed up by Olawale, was sprinkled in with a little bit of Tywan Jones and what he brings to the table. So with that being said, if they decide to run with that unit, it's going to be good work. I mean, the consistency, the chemistry, it hasn't really been where I expected it to. And now it's only preseason, and I get it. I mean, this is the running base stuff. But you would figure at this point that their base stuff would be pretty darn good by now. And we haven't seen that. So that being said, I am expecting them to put a drive together. I mean, the fire has to be lit under them this week. They're going to have to come out and perform. So it was nice to hear Jack touch upon that as far as, getting them the work, putting them out there. Now, one of the things that I would like to see, and this is where we start filling in the gaps of what Jack said, was I would really like to see some DeAndre Washington up in that mix over Tywan Jones, let's say, or even more importantly, GA3. I would like to see GA3 get a chance behind this offensive line, taking handoffs from Carr, just to kind of see, where he's at on that level, because, we've talked about this before when Latavius Murray broke out on the scene. Sperano and Reggie McKenzie were both quoted to say, it was one game. We don't know if that's going to be consistent. And that was one of the other things that we go back to the Green Bay game. Atkinson got his carries, and you saw the defensive change formation when he came into the game. They were protecting the outside and not just stacking the middle. So, other people recognized what he brought to the table. So once again, I want to see a little bit more of that. I'd like to see, how he's fitting in this system, especially behind our big and potentially great offensive line. So that's another thing that I was looking at. The other thing that's been talked about and mentioned is Jalen Richard. All reports have kind of leaned to the fact that this is going to be his debut week. So he's been carrying a lot of hype in camp. I'm curious to see what he brings to the table. I think that's going to be one of the factors that this coaching staff is going to factor in the next 2 weeks, which is, where does he fit in the system as a rookie? Are we going to actually run with two rookies, running backs on the squad? I mean, it can be done. The running back situation on a football team is pretty much, there's not a lot to learn. You have to be able to pass protect. I think that's the big key. They want to see where Jalen Richards at as far as pass protection. They've gotten a good look at Washington. They put him in some situations. And I think that goes well for us. I mean, when you look at this team building up, I really believe they need to focus on the running back situation. So those are some of the key things that I took when Jack said that he wants to start the starters. I think that should be a focus on. The other thing that he talked about, once again, was the fact that they're not game planning. We got into that, but there's certain things I think that this team could look at. And on a soft note, let's just soften it up a little bit. Again, the media bringing up the Colton Underwood, with the Olympian and him asking for a date and getting the date. Yeah, that was a little funny, ha ha ha, that was cute. But at the same time, man, it's a distraction for a guy, for me. This is just my personal thoughts on this. That I think it's a great story. He makes this video, he gets this date. But at the same time, I mean, he needs to be focused on making this team. This guy's a tight end sitting behind a whole lot of other tight ends. So with Gabe Holmes being the focal point early on before he got hurt, I think the attention goes back to Rivera. So, I mean, this guy's distracting himself from his real task at hand, which is making this football team. So hopefully that doesn't not only hurt him, but it doesn't hurt us getting a good evaluation on this guy, because now all he could think about is this date with this Olympian. So I think they made a little bit too much of a big deal of that, and Jack kind of put out there that he encourages that from his team to be open and out there doing their thing. But I think that was a little misquote, in my opinion. I think the focus right now should not be on this cute Olympian. I think it should, I can't say her name, so I'm not even going to try. Ramison, I tried. I think his focus should be in the film room and what he could do to improve as a tight end and challenge Rivera for that spot, That way, not only does he have a fair shot, but, Rivera gets pushed and motivated as well, which, again, only helps this football team. Outside of that, Jack talked a lot about, getting back to the fundamentals, the process of preseason, and certain things that we need to focus on moving forward. I mean, I just want to say, the way that this team and the way that it's being portrayed, and it hasn't been said because they're not going to show their hand, right? Is they're doing a lot of evaluation, in my opinion, obviously on the practice field, which in some aspects is really good. But, for me, and this is kind of goes back to what I said about Latavius Murray with his Kansas City debut when he broke out the big run a few years ago. That's kind of what they were talking about. They need to see it on all levels. When you're dealing with athletes, in my opinion, I mean, yes, you definitely need to see them on the practice field. You need to see them in the film room. You need to see how they can translate all this when the lights come on in game time. But when you're an athlete and those lights come on and you're facing an actual opponent, not your own team, where your quarterback's wearing a red jersey, sometimes you're 7-on-7, sometimes you're not even 11-on-11, you want to see how these guys react in real time. So I give the coaching staff credit when it comes to the offensive side of the ball for them to say, this is what we like. But at the same time, I mean, let's take a look at some of these guys that are doing it when the lights come on. That's really what I want to see. And I don't get enough of that from this coaching staff, whether it's on the preseason playing field or if it's in the press conferences. So, but Jack came off. Jack's really good in front of the camera. He came off really confident. He didn't seem too concerned. Yes, there's areas that need to be worked on, things that need to be focused on. But for the most part, I like Jack's approach of being confident and continuing to instill the confidence in his players, because I really believe that moving forward it's all about confidence. And that's the other side of preseason, where I will say that preseason is important, guys, when it comes to building confidence, chemistry, and consistency. And you can't have that if you're not implementing certain parts of it. And, the other bad part about the biggest thing bad about preseason is the fact that you don't want to show your hand, especially when you're going to play a team that you're going to face later. So there's a lot of bridges, there's a lot of hurdles that we have to get over and cross. But, the whole point at this point in time is to have faith into this coaching staff. We have up until this point. There's no reason for us to stray away from that thought process. We need to continue to have that going. The other thing, the last thing I want to talk about that Jack mentioned was Johnny Holland. He's going to be a topic moving forward because Derek Carr got into him as well. But they talked about Holland and his ability. You know, he's probably been the biggest standout rookie, and an undrafted rookie at that, another undrafted rookie making a name for himself here on this football team as a receiver at that, which is exciting. But he didn't tip his hat. Once again, I mean, here we are. He's talking about the perimeters of things. He said that he's really grown for a guy who hasn't played a lot of football in his life. I mean, he's really showed his athleticism and his ability to make plays using his speed. He's one of the fastest guys we have on the football team. So, I mean, what am I going to read into that? Well, I think Johnny Holland has made his name primarily from the opportunities that he's had. He's done a really great job in the punt return department and even the kick return department. You saw the speed, you saw his ability to catch the ball. He's made good decisions, fair catches, things like that. I think he's been, for me, the biggest standout as far as when we're looking at guys who are going to be returning kicks and returning punts, that this is a guy that we need to keep an eye on. I would like to see Holland myself get a little bit more opportunity in the passing game, and we don't necessarily need to see it from Derek Carr, because let's face it, we got Crabtree, we got Coop, we got Seth Roberts, we got Andre Holmes. That's our starting four. And last year we started the season with Bryce Butler on the roster, Rod Streeter on the roster, who Rod Streeter was never activated the whole season. So, you know, I believe that there is definitely a place where we could bring a guy like Holland, keep him on the roster. We could use him as a special teamer. And if he has the opportunity to get into games unlike Rod Streeter and Bryce Butler did last year, then there's a guy that has tremendous speed. He's been actually showing that he could run some routes and he can catch the ball. So he's made some plays. So maybe we get him a little bit more involved with McGloin. At least get him more involved with McGloin this week. Have him run with the twos more. Get him some plays. Get him, you know, some of them famous screens that we're known for throwing, to see what he could do in the open field when he has space. But most importantly, I like to see him coming out of the slot and then maybe hit him on a good slant route and see his speed and his burst and his playmaking ability in open field. And I believe that this guy has a really good chance of making it on the team. So Jack kind of didn't, say that. I mean, he's in a position right now. We're getting ready to cut down to 75. And that's kind of, he didn't want to play his hand there either. So this is, once again, this is the perimeter of what Jack talked about. And I'm filling in the gaps. So look for Holland, to have hopefully more of an impact, more of a role this week and the week after, so we could fully evaluate exactly what he's going to bring to the table. Now, Derek Carr talked about that a lot too, and that was Derek. That's the biggest thing I took out of Derek's. There's two things out of Derek's press conference that I took. Number one, it was the fact that he thought Holland was great too, and he had a skill set. But if you notice, even Derek Carr didn't necessarily talk about him being a major player. He said he had great talent for a rookie. It reminded him of Seth Roberts, which, it took Seth Roberts 2 years, and Holland's only in his first. So I think that there's a talent there. And the question becomes, and this is the biggest question out of all of this, is what do you do with him? Once again, what you do with a guy like Holland? Do you take the risk of cutting him and making him pass waivers and then put him on the practice squad, just hoping that no one comes in and plucks him off your roster to put him on their active roster, even if it's as a punt returner or a kick returner? Because that's something we have to look at. Not so much, as a receiver. Some of these teams could pluck this guy up and actually use him in the kick and punt return game. So we have to be careful what we do with Holland. Now, with wide receivers, there's plenty to go around. There's a lot of guys that we haven't really got a good look at, and that's disturbing. But this kid has an opportunity, and if we run the roster the way we did last year and take that gamble, you could essentially keep a guy like Holland on the roster and not even activate him all season, but at least you protect a good investment for the future, even if it's in the kick and punt return game, guys. So whether we run, the same kind of roster we did last year, and you see Taiwan Jones and Latavius Murray back there sometimes on kick returns, and then mixing up with TJ Carey, who else was it? Taiwan Jones could do punts as well. Guys like that, if we put those guys in those situations, even a DeAndre Washington has been used in that in the preseason. He looked good too. But sometimes you want to protect some of these guys. So Holland would be a great fit to where you keep guys like, even if you keep Taiwan Jones on the roster, which we'll talk about more as preseason goes on. He's a guy I feel is on the bubble. Holland's a great fit on special teams and as a fifth or even sixth option in the wide receiver core, where you're getting the best out of him in special teams and not worried about is he ready to take on the speed and the brutality of a regular season being a wide receiver and getting pushed around at the line of scrimmage. So it's just something to look at. Other than that, real quick before we go to break, Derek Carr also mentioned that he talked about some of the shots that he talked about a little bit the pass to Cooper in between two defenders. Yeah, it was a great play. Was it ill-advised? Probably. The one that he threw up the Coop that was intercepted. He touched base that he is the type of quarterback that will take those chances from time to time, but probably not as often as he would in the preseason. So he's basically putting out there that he's doing these things just because he can right now, because it doesn't affect the team one way or the other. These numbers do not carry over into regular season, so this kind of falls back into that whole realm of it's just preseason, it doesn't matter. Test yourself, test your wide receivers, test your ability to get the ball up and let Cooper go get it. The bad thing to that is you don't want to get Cooper hurt, and we're going to talk about that here in the second segment. So with that being said, I think from a preseason talk, from a preseason standpoint, that's all I got as far as the press conferences today. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to take another look at the promo that Pirate put together for this Friday's pregame broadcast. So go ahead, stay tuned, watch that promo. When we get back, we're going to get into some of the other things that I want to talk about with this football team. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the W2W Review. I'm the Oakland Knight, and yes, once again, I am running solo. My partner in crime is over there, doing his thing, man, putting that broadcast together. So make sure you tune in Friday to the Will to Win broadcast pregame special. We're going to have a couple of guests, one featured guest. Well, actually, they're both going to be featured guests. We're going to bring you guys a lot of information in a different way, something that should help us be able to look at this game in a different way. So we're excited about that. So make sure you stay tuned this Friday for our pregame broadcast here on the Wheel to Win. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other things that are happening in the news. I'm going to start off with one that's an oldie but goodie, if you will, and that is Todd Marinovich. He just got popped out there for, I think it was like drunkenness and marijuana is what I read. Now, a lot of the times, alcohol and marijuana combined don't allow you to run around the streets naked. But, this is a guy that's had problems his whole life. If you guys don't know the Todd Marinovich story, this was one hell of an athlete, and his dad really pushed him hard to be that athlete, and his whole life was surrounded by him training, him lifting weights, him, just his dad riding him. And there's a lot of stories out there like that where, fathers take their sons and they want to turn them into these great, people in the world. And that's exactly what happened to Todd Marinovich. Now, by the time the Raiders got a hold of him, they drafted him in the first round. His whole career just fell apart. It came out that he had some cocaine issues. He had some drug issues. His career never got started. The years and years of all the emotional abuse from his father, pushing him too hard. He lost his interest in the game. He was hiding his feelings throughout the fact that he is doing these drugs and things like that. And unfortunately for a lot of these players, and he's not the only one out there that gets caught up into this trap. We have another guy that caught up into the same persona, maybe not the same storyline, but that was one Jamarcus Russell, right? Our favorite Raider of all time. He got caught up on that purple drink. The pressures of the NFL, the pressures of being the number one quarterback, the pressures of him, losing his uncle, who was a staple point in his life right before he got drafted. So he didn't really have that support, that one guy that he really leaned on for his career. He couldn't handle it. And Marinovich fits that mold. So, it's very unfortunate to see a guy that had all the potential in the world just get caught up into this whole scene, have substance abuse issues, and see it carrying on so late into his life. Here's a guy, like I said, that had all the potential in the world, and it was washed away between substance abuse. And it kind of kind of leads into what we're dealing with as Aldon Smith is concerned. I hope that Aldon Smith takes the opportunity to look at these type of situations and ask himself, is it all worth it? Is turning on a Periscope thing allegedly and doing this, is it worth my career? Is it worth getting drunk in an airport and shouting out things I shouldn't be saying and getting suspended and drinking and driving and hit and runs? And this what it brought to me was, we have a guy on this football team still on, not on the roster, but under contract. That is, he's out there and he's struggling with life right now, whatever his issue is. And I think I'm going to go back to what Eddie DeBartolo said at the Hall of Fame. And, the league has done a good job of laying down some strict guidelines and some strict punishments for these players that are getting involved into things off the field that they shouldn't be doing. But I think what we need to see is more than just the punishment, that the league and teams in general really put together programs that really get more involved where they're in, especially if they're under contract. Obviously they'll probably have to put some of this into the CBA, or they'll have to put it personally into these guys' contract, where a guy like Aldon Smith can not only get all the help he needs, but be able to use the team aspect of it, and have guys like Derek Carr, guys like Khalil Mack, even guys like Amari Cooper, Bruce Irvin, even because he's had his own struggles in life, would be able to be a support group for a guy like Aldon Smith. From what I understand, as it sits now, you're not allowed to have contact with the team whatsoever. I mean, he's completely suspended from the NFL all the way up until November. So I think, not having that team camaraderie, I can't even speak, man. Some of these words, camaraderie. Yeah, I did the best I could. But anyway, you guys know what I'm trying to say. And have this support group there and being able to have these guys, obviously they're not going to have the time to be there on call or anything, but, once a week, twice a week, a phone call here and there, just telling somebody, hey, I'm here for you, man. I love you, man. We can't wait till you get back. Stay strong. Stay Raider strong, right? And just really keep that ground level there. Back in the day when Todd Marinovich was going through his problems, it was a whole different league. I mean, we were still here in late 70s, early 80s, for this cat, and it was a cocaine league, man. Joe Montana has substance abuse issues with it. So these are just things that were in place then. We don't see it in place now. And if anything that should be taken out of these situations is just that. What can the league do better? What can organizations, teams do better to give a better foundation for these players that, they're human, guys. I mean, we look at these guys, they're athletes, they're role models to children. We admire them and what kind of feelings they give us on Sundays when they're able to make big plays, get big sacks, throw great throws. But we sometimes tend to forget that they're human too. They have same human issues. They suffer from things like depression and anxiety and all these other things that lead them to make some bad decisions. And on top of it, they're given a ton of money to be able to do it. And so it doesn't necessarily affect that part of their life. So they can have continuous access flow with this stuff. They have all the alcohol they want in the world. They have the money to get all the drugs and pills that they want in the world. So I think the league organizations, once again, need to do a better job of putting things in place to help these kind of players through these situations and allowing their teammates. I mean, if you're not going to exile them from the league forever, they should be allowed to talk to some of their teammates, guys that they're leaning on when they're on the field, but they should be able to lean on them off the field no matter their circumstance. That's just a personal thought for me. It just kind of hit home with Marinovich and what we're dealing with Aldon Smith and guys like Josh Gordon in the league that obviously need a larger support group so they could actually get through their problems. Think about the player off the field, not just the player on the field. So that being said, I want to get into something else that's been reported and talked about over the last 24 hours, and just maybe kind of get a deeper thought of possibly what's going on, because it can be alarming and a bit of concern, and that is Amari Cooper not suiting up and participating right now. Is it just to protect Amari Cooper now? Is this one of those preseason decisions to say, you know what, Amari Cooper is someone that we plan on utilizing heavily come the regular season. There's no need for him to participate this week. We don't want to showcase exactly what we're doing with Amari Cooper. We don't want him out there getting thrown around. against this Tennessee Titan defense, and we just want to give him a chance to recover from training camp and the 2 preseason games that he has played? Or is there kind of some lingering thing going on, maybe a hamstring, maybe a little tweak of the ankle, rib, a finger, whatever it may be, or maybe he just got the day off just to kind of get his body right for the preseason game. One thing's for sure for me: if you're not suiting up in a preseason week, even if he does play, look for it to be one series with Cooper, and then that's it. It's one of those games, like I said, that's going to be real ticky-tack because of the situation we're in, where we face this team in week 3. So should we be concerned? That's the question. Should we be concerned? Should we read more into this than we should? No, I don't think so. I think that we take it for what it is, even if it's he's a little dinged up, a little sore, a little bruised. It is what it is. Get him right, get him prepared, because of the fact of what this dress rehearsal is going to be like, unlike last week, where we don't need to see a lot of Cooper. We just don't. And, why take that risk, especially in a team where you're going to face again? You don't want to get a lot of looks. You're not going to be able to utilize Cooper in this game the way you would any other preseason game, and you're definitely not going to utilize him the way that you want to in the regular season. So why not take this opportunity and just sit him out? So regardless if that's what this is, or if he is just a little sore or has a little thing going on, I think it's best right now. They're doing the right thing, and they're not publicizing it in the media the way that maybe we would want to know, because we're inquiring minds and we want to know. It's just something that we could overlook and just take it for what it's worth. And it's just like, it's preseason. We're 2 weeks out. You're definitely not going to get a dose of Cooper in the Seattle game, the last preseason game anyway. So it might be a perfect time to primarily shut guys down that you're going to be leaning heavily on. Well, the other question would be, well, if you're going to do that to Cooper, what about Derek Carr? Well, you're exactly right. I think the difference being there would be the fact that Derek Carr is a leader on this football team. He's that little engine that could, right? He's that motor that always has to continuously run. He's going to have to be there. He's going to have to participate in practices and keep things going, teaching, leading by example. And when it comes to the game, I mean, there's so much more. When it comes to Amari Cooper, it's Amari Cooper and Derek Carr. When it comes to Derek Carr, it's Derek Carr and the whole football team. It's the way that he views the field. It's the way that he controls the offensive line. It's chemistry between not only Cooper, but Crabtree, Walford, Seth Roberts. He's got to have chemistry with Latavius Murray, Olawale, or whoever we decide to throw back there. So you can't necessarily, X him out. Now, I know there's other teams that have done that already this preseason, guys like Aaron Rodgers, for example, who's been sitting out the first 2 preseason games. But I guarantee you that Aaron Rodgers is going to probably this week go out there and at least get 1 series in and start to warm up for the regular season. But I think Derek Carr is not in an Aaron Rodgers category yet, so that's going to be different. But Coop, on the other hand, like I said, his primary job is to run routes and catch the football. And, as much as we think that we need to see him with Carr more because we don't feel that the chemistry is there where it needs to be just yet, once again, we're not seeing enough practice footage tapes. We're not getting certain things leaked out. So, you could kind of look at it a little differently, even though as fans, we don't really like to. We want to see the best of the best out there. But once again, we're going off the saying, it's just preseason. So why take the risk? The only other thing that I question is if you're going to do that to Cooper, you might as well do that with Crabtree. Now, Crabtree's out there participating, and maybe you just going to use that as a decoy. But once again, if Cooper sits out, this changes the game a little bit. Now, primarily, you'll probably see Seth Roberts and Andre Holmes and Michael Crabtree. But I would personally take this opportunity to utilize this to see a little bit more of Hollins. And what about guys like McCaffrey and Mickens? We haven't seen a lot of these guys. This could be the perfect opportunity early on, whether you're implementing them with Derek Carr or where you're implementing them more with Matt McGloin. Let's take, because I talked about this yesterday on the Defensive Tuesday show, I want to see the depth. I really want to put our depth to the test. I want to see these guys. It's preseason. It doesn't matter. So let's throw these guys out there. Whether they're making mistakes and we lose the game is so irrelevant at this point. If we could get a good look at some of these young wide receivers, if we can get a good look at some of these running backs, more DeAndre Washington, more GA3, and everything willing, we get, our first debut look at Jalen Richards. This is going to be something that I personally want to see out of this game. We're not going to have your normal, regular dress rehearsal game. Okay, that's fine. Then let's take a look at the depth. We've seen it on the defensive side of the ball. We've seen our depth. We were able to look at Cowsers and Calhouns and Wards and Lathams, and we've been able to implement different things on defense. I want to see a little bit more of that in the next 2 weeks, primarily this one, because like I said, we're getting ready to cut the roster to 75, and we'll be covering all that on the preseason extravaganza at the end of the month, so we could start taking a look at what we believe is going to be our 53-man roster moving forward, and maybe some of the key things we're looking for. And when it comes to it right now, for me on offense, it's running backs and wide receivers, primarily who's going to be the complementary back, which I believe is DeAndre Washington, and who's going to be that specialty guy. Do we pay Tywan Jones to continue to utilize him, or do we make some space for guys like GA3 or Jalen Richards? In the receiving core, I want to see Holland returning kicks, returning punts, getting some opportunities to run more routes and catch more balls. I think that's going to be key moving forward. So these are the things I want to see on offense, and as well as defense. I want to continue to see the rotation. We know we're going to get a lot of that in the final preseason game against Seattle, which we'll get into next week. But, this is a prime time right now. If there's any, bright spot on having to play Tennessee this week, is it gives us the opportunity to really push ourselves to look at these younger players. All right, guys, we are out of time for today. Once again, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning into the W2W review every day and supporting us as we try to bring the best content that we can and put out there for YouTube every single day, so you guys can have different looks and give you guys a place to go down, have great conversations, which you guys have been doing in the comment section. So let's continue to do that. And if you want, please, we encourage you to go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, follow us all at The Will to Win. And any questions and concerns, please email us at the w2w@gmail.com. That is the w2w@gmail.com. All right, until we meet again tomorrow, I am the Oakland Knight, and you guys stay Raider strong. Hey there, I'm Jason Smith, also known as the Oakland Knight. We'd like to thank you for watching the Will to Win broadcast here on YouTube. And if you would like to stay up to date for more content like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Or you could click any one of the videos on the side to watch more great videos. Thank you once again, and stay Raider strong.